Now, I don't know if you guys have noticed, but over the past few weeks, conversations about Manchester United's midfield have suddenly gone really quiet. Suddenly, no one is questioning Ruben Amorim and the fact that he uses only two midfield players in the centre of the park. And ultimately, that's what happens when you win matches. People question your ideas less. But also, this has coincided with the fact that Amorim has made a slight tweak. Now, we are going to use the Brighton match as the main example because over the past few seasons, United have had big problems in midfield, especially against Brighton. It's been a game that we have very much struggled in. Brighton have a lot of capable midfielders. They have always been a team that sort of tactically are quite flexible, rotate a lot of technically gifted players, and United, particularly with only two men in midfield, were coming into this game and we were a little bit nervous. We felt that we could beat Brighton, but we thought that the midfield might be a bit of a problem. And the main reason why it's normally a problem is because United only have two players in there, and we know that a lot of the time the opposition are going to play with three. So let's say United try and engage up the pitch a little bit higher. Let's say United are aggressive on this line here. The problem is that in here, we then get a little bit outnumbered, 2 versus 3, and, Bruno Fernandes and Casemiro, as good as they are, as experienced as they are not elite ground-covering, ball-winning midfielders. Bruno plays with a great intensity and works incredibly hard for his side and covers so much ground, but he's not a defensive ball winner. And Casemiro struggles with the ground coverage, right? His legs have gone a little bit, still a very good player, but he struggles to get about and cover loads of ground. So United with two players, this has been a massive problem. Until the weekend, where, as we all know, we saw Luke Shaw basically becoming a central midfielder. Now, that might sound like a slight exaggeration, but it wasn't. Luke Shaw was literally playing in midfield at times for United in this game. And Dalot would actually drop a little bit deeper, almost into the back three, when he was pushed back by the Brighton winger. But what this allowed was Bruno Fernandes to jump a little bit higher in the squeezing moment, in the pressing moment. So United were now essentially matched up 3 versus 3 in midfield here. And you can see in this particular screenshot, it actually looks like Bruno Fernandes is in the 10 position, with Shaw and Casemiro forming a double pivot behind him. You can actually also see it again here, and also here as well. And here's another example. Bruno Fernandes in this game wasn't playing as a 6 when United were pressing high. And that's really important, because we often talk about Bruno and his lack of tactical discipline, the fact that when he plays deep in midfield, he can be caught a little bit, straying away from his position, being too aggressive whilst pressing. Well, actually, in this game, he was allowed to. He was connected as an attacker in the pressing moment, and that's why the midfield didn't look so exposed. Luke Shaw basically became the extra midfielder, allowing Bruno to play higher. Now, we have also seen recent changes to United's approach in the mid-block, which once again has helped the two central midfielders. So if we go back to sort of the start of this season, and also majority of last season, United in the mid-block were 5-2-3. So 5 defenders across the back line, then 2 central midfielders here, and then a front 3 over here. And the problem is very, very obvious. If we look either side of the two United midfielders, there is so much space for them to cover. And as we've said already, they're not exactly experts. This isn't their area of expertise. They're not amazing at covering all this ground. To tell the truth, most players would struggle with this. But United have made some changes. In some moments, we've moved to more of a 4-4-2. Now, why does that help the two in midfield? Because we're still playing with a 2 in the centre. So you wouldn't think things are any different, but actually they are. So United in a 4-4-2. Cunha drops a little bit deeper onto the left-hand side, which is important. Sesko and Mbeumo move across into the front two, which doesn't really affect our midfield too much, apart from blocking the opposition's attempts to get in there. But Ahmad, rather than playing as a sort of a wing-back, is now playing as a wide midfielder. Now, if we look at the two gaps either side of the United midfield, they are now actually occupied by Manchester United players. The gaps are not there. So the space for Bruno Fernandes and Casemiro to cover has shrunk. It's been made smaller by having more Manchester United players about. Now, this isn't something we see all the time. There are still moments where United drop a little bit deeper. In these moments, I feel that our wide players are helping more than what they were before. They feel like less of a front 3 and more of a midfield 4. So again, these two don't have as much ground to cover. And also, on occasion, like against Brighton, we're seeing the United centre-backs being aggressive, once again joining the midfield. So basically, it is still a two-man midfield, but they're getting more help, either from the inside forwards or the centre-backs or sometimes the striker, and that's why they look better. Now, if you ask me, United's problems in terms of the midfield over the past 12 months haven't just been out of possession when we're defending. We've actually seen issues with the United midfield on the ball as well. We've seen two players that are not first phase specialists. They're not players that want to drop into the first line and receive with their back to goal. They're not particularly press resistant. Neither of them are good ball carriers. They're not players that can pick the ball up deep and carry it 30, 40 yards. They're not that sort of player. And they're also not really the type of players to get on the ball in the middle and slow a game down and sort of run the tempo of a game, increasing the speed, slowing the speed back down. They're not really that type of player. So how do you help them? How do you help them in midfield? Well, you change their role. You change the role to one that suits them. So what we've seen from United a lot recently is, of course, the similar goal kick structure where De Ligt moves a little bit further forward, and we've seen Bruno Fernandes boosted further forward. Now, this immediately helps him because it means he's not receiving in the first phase over here. He's not in a position where he's got to carry. He's high playing as an attacker, which is what Bruno Fernandes has always done best. What we are also seeing, though, is United playing direct. Long balls over the top. And that means something very, very important. Because when the second ball drops, whether it be from Benjamin Sesko, Matheus Cunha, or the opposition centre-backs, when the ball drops in midfield, our two central midfielders, Bruno Fernandes and Casemiro, are facing forward. And I think that's really, really important. They're not receiving with their back to goal, where you've got to do a lot of scanning work to figure out where the player is behind you. You've got to have a lot of mobility. You've got to have agility. You've got to have sometimes a low centre of gravity to sort of spin away from a player. When you are facing the ball, receiving the second ball, facing the opposition's goal, things are much easier. Everything's in front of you. The angles have been reduced for you to work with, which makes it easier for the player on the ball to make a decision. And I think that has massively helped both Bruno Fernandes and Casemiro. They're not receiving with their back to goal in deep positions. They're receiving in the middle of the pitch with a split second of time just to get on the ball, take a touch and get their head up. From there, this plays to their strengths. We know they've both got really good passing range. They're not necessarily required to slow the game down and pass it about. They get the ball in this position and are able quite quickly to fire the ball forward, particularly into those wide zones where we know United are so effective. So we're almost simplifying the job of the midfielders, which makes life easier for them. Now, of course, in terms of the long term, the ceiling of this project, that does lead to some questions, because playing with a simplified midfield probably only gets you so far. But in terms of working with what we've currently got, Ruben Amorim is getting more from these two right now. Now, I think the other thing that's interesting about these two in midfield is their license to get forward and be useful in the attacking third. Now, we know that Bruno Fernandes has always preferred playing there. Bruno can be an 8, he can be a 6, but it's not where he wants to be. He wants to be close to goal, he wants to make an impact, he wants goals and assists, he wants to be involved, being creative. But also Casemiro. Casemiro's a good ball winner, and certainly in his peak was an excellent defensive midfielder. But he's also always been quite effective when he's given the license to get forward. Again, he has got that eye for a pass. His creativity is pretty decent, and he can be a goal threat as well. But I actually think the most important thing about Casemiro and Bruno Fernandes on the ball recently has been their experience. Now, what I tend to find personally is experienced players seem more comfortable on the ball. They seem less flustered because they've sort of been there 1,000 times before and know what they're doing. Sometimes what we can see is players trying to play the ball too quickly. Casemiro and Bruno Fernandes have probably been criticised for that. Certainly by myself, they have. Trying to fire the ball forward too quickly. But what we've seen recently is, yes, still quite a quick, direct game, but subtlety in the details when they are working with the ball. This goal here against Liverpool, Bruno Fernandes just buys his time in midfield a little bit, just to draw Virgil van Dijk a little bit further out, allowing United to attack that space in behind. That only happens because Bruno Fernandes has the intelligence, but also the confidence and composure, the belief in his own ability, to draw Van Dijk closer to him. He's not in a rush to get rid of the ball. He wants to play with the ball. In terms of pitch personality, Bruno Fernandes is a player who wants the ball. So in that moment, he takes his time, and that's what creates the space. We also saw it at the weekend against Brighton. Casemiro here, he just takes a split second longer. He just delays the pass, and that's what gives Cunha more room. And it's these little details that are allowing Manchester United to access these really good attacking players, but with more space, more time. Because Bruno Fernandes is taking a little bit longer on the ball, it just draws the midfield a little bit further out. If Bruno Fernandes rushes the pass, the defender can get there. But because he plays slow, it draws the player out. And this is what gives players like Cunha, Sesko and Mbeumo the time from where they can be more effective. Now, of course, if you ask me, the Manchester United midfield setup is still far from perfect. I don't know that Casemiro and Bruno really complement each other that much in terms of a partnership, But I think Ruben Amorim deserves credit for getting it to work. What I have asked for a lot really is to get more out of the current players, to play a way which suits them. And I would say recently we have done that for the two United midfielders. Now again, of course, we need evolution. We need more complex ideas. Midfield it's great to simplify it in the short term. In the long term, I think it does have to be complex because it's such an important part of the pitch. So United will need to sort of apply more concepts and play more complicated football eventually. But right now, when United are sort of stripping things back to basic a little bit to get results, to get confidence, to get momentum, I think Ruben Amorim has done a really nice job with the midfield. Now, at some point, other teams in the Premier League will sort of cotton on and adjust and make life difficult for the two United midfielders. But right now, it's working. And like I've said a lot recently, whilst things are working, I'm going to try and be as positive as possible because we've had so many sad, miserable videos over the past year. So whilst it's good, we're going to stick with the positives, and we're going to end on the positive that right now the midfield 2 is sort of becoming a 3 with help from others, and also the 2 of them that are in there are sort of blossoming and really flourishing in the current system and approach, which is good from Ruben Amorim and the 2 players. But that is all for today's video, so thank you guys very much for watching. I hope you have enjoyed it. If you have, please leave a like, subscribe, and get your notifications on. And as always, I'll see you in the next one.